Sorry, independent warranty support integrity testing with Luke Cole. Luke will discuss the difference between the building control inspection and independent warranty support and why it's often mandatory. This webinar will also cover British standards for roof assessments on new and existing roof podium checks. My name is Shanika and I'm the Training and Learning Coordinator here at CABE, and I'll be acting as moderator for this morning's session. We strive to create interactive webinars, so we do encourage you to submit any questions you may have during the session. These questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. We'll get through as many as possible, but if we do run out of time, we will collect any questions and send the answers out in due course. You can also contact us on webinars@cbuilde.com. If you're watching us live today, you can use the side panel to send in your questions. Alternatively, you can get in touch with us via the social links now on screen. So let me introduce today's webinar speaker, Luke Cole. Luke is a manager at GeoShield Roof Integrity Testing Division with over 15 years experience in the industry. Luke is a qualified roofing professional, expert in all aspects of flat roof waterproofing, as a trained applicator in the fields of single ply protection and liquid applied waterproofing. Luke is ideally skilled and at identifying those troublesome water ingress routes, often hidden with blue, green, and existing flat roof constructions. So if you give me a couple of seconds, I'll just hand over to Luke and he will begin shortly. So Luke, you'll be able to share your screen now.
Bear with me, guys. Let's just get the share going. I'll probably at the top of the PowerPoint, wouldn't it? So just to introduce myself, as Shanika said, I'm from a roofing background. I currently run the division here at GeoShield. So just to give you a bit of an idea about GeoShield, we've got two sides of the company. One side is provisionally independently testing gas membranes. And then our side is independently testing roofs and waterproofing. As Shanika said earlier, I've got, I think, about 20 years now in the roofing industry, fitting different types of membranes, different systems. So are quite well equipped to walk on a roof and look at certain problem areas. So what we do as a company is we offer independent warranty support, both on new buildings and also existing leak detection on older existing roofs as well. So just to give you a little bit about GeoShield, the division was formed in 2015, as it says, by experts who have decades worth of experience. John, the owner of GeoShield, he's worked not just here in the UK, but internationally as well. Paul, one of our directors, he's a founding member of the British Verification Council. And then we've got certain organisations we also are accredited with. So things like RAWTA, for example, the Roof and Waterproofing Test Association. That is one in particular that needs to be of interest, because that's one that NHBC, LABC, etc. They like to see that qualification of that association when it comes to third-party testing. So just to give you an idea of what the seminar is going to be about. So obviously we know about building control inspection. So we're going to talk about what they do, but really the difference between that and what we do as independent warranty support. So although there are some similarities, there's also some difference as well. So we'll touch on what's the difference between the two. And then we'll go on to look at some of the awareness of British standards and the requirements of companies like we just mentioned, NHBC, LABC, Premier, the big warranty providers. And then we'll touch on some of the approved methods of integrity testing and what's involved in the reporting procedures as well. So the types of green roofs that we tend to come across, there's three types there. You've got your intensive, which you tend to see more perhaps over on top of a car park, so more like a park type area, quite a deep vegetation, bigger plants, etc. Then you've got your semi-intensive, so that's something you might see like a garden roof, a much thinner type ground into that, only about 15 to 30 centimetres substrate base. And then you've finally got your extensive, again, a much thinner type base, but this one is self-seeding. So it's just the sedum's put down and then allowed to self-vegetate. So quite a natural looking finish to that one. Your different types of roof that we tend to get called out to test. You've got your blue roof. Some of you may not have heard of blue roofs. I don't know, but a blue roof is a bit like an attenuation tank. So it's designed to control the amount of water that goes into your storm water drains. So acts as a tank system on the roof, and then valves are installed to let that water flow off at a controlled rate. Your brown roof systems are more commonly referred to as bioverse roofs. This is the self-vegetating substrates, as we said, these natural ones which are allowed to vegetate in their own way. Your blue-green, that's as it sounds. So you've got your water attenuation, and then your green roof finish, and then biosolar, green roof, again, as it sounds. The idea of a green roof system, but with biosolar panels on there as well. So just thinking about the typical kind of build-ups of what you'd expect to see. This is quite an important slide really to pick up on, because as you can see, you've got your base roof structure substrate at the bottom there, and then your waterproofing layer sitting on top of that. Now, why I say it's important, because above that, as you can see, there's actually 4 layers of system that's installed on top of the waterproofing layer. And now later on in one of the slides, we're going to see the importance of testing while you're at waterproofing stage. As you can, I'm sure you're aware, once those 4 layers go on top of the waterproofing layer, to then try and find a leak is going to be very difficult. So it's the importance of testing at the right stage of your development. So why are GeoShield doing what they're doing? Why are they offering independent inspections? Well, because of the design guidance and clauses that have been put in place. We're going to touch on some of those today, recognising some of the past building failures and trying to get away from these causes in the future. So why these companies, such as you can see on the screen, have put these things in place, what they expect from companies that are now installing these types of roofs. So moving on to building control then, we won't spend ages on this because I know most of you are going to know what building control do. You know, their building control are set or designed in a way to eliminate or to learn from past building failures. They have certain minimum standards that they need to achieve, and a building control surveyor is interested in making sure that these minimum standards are complied with. But the difference we're going to see between the two is that a building surveyor concentrates really on what they see on the day of their inspection, or perhaps at the time a completion certificate is issued. So moving on to warranty support, so flipping the coin to the other side, very similar in a way that, again, these things all work on learning from building mistakes, or as it says here, past insurance claims. So similar in that aspect, but what's the difference? Well, we have to take to consideration not just what we see during the visit, but we have to look at the installation and the membrane across a much longer period of time. So as it mentions here, a structure within a 15-year period, for example. So we're not looking at just what we see during our visit, but also we've got to look at the way that the system has been installed, maybe correct falls on the roof. They may not cause problems or issues straight away, but we have to take in consideration, will these cause issues within a few years of the building being in place. So building control warranty support, as we know, they're both vital. There are similarities, but yet they are also very different at the same time. So just to give us an idea of the types of clauses that have been put in. So here we've got the LABC document. This particular section is looking at flat roofs, and it mentions there about testing on flat roofs, and if testing to demonstrate waterproofing integrity is required, it should be undertaken by a suitably qualified and experienced third party who is independent from the roofing contractor. So this is where people are perhaps coming unstuck, not having the knowledge of what is required. You know, years ago when I was roofing, we used to just install our product, rely on the warranty that was given by the product manufacturer, and that was good enough. But now you know, these things are being put in place because of the issues and the claims that are coming in, that they want this third party, so this non-biased testing. So that's on flat roofs. Similar slide, LABC again, this is the green roofs, exactly the same content. Again, required testing, suitably qualified, experienced third party who is independent from the roofing contractor. So it touches on some of the things that should be provided. So the efficacy of the method proposed in the circumstances of the project, a detailed testing regime that includes integrity testing and detailing, specifically where the warranty surveyor has raised any issues, experience and training of operator, and membership of an appropriate trade association that sets a code of conduct for the service. So these are all things that LABC have the right to ask, to see proof, one, of the experience of the contractor installing, but also the membership of an appropriate trade association of whoever is inspecting the membrane on site. So moving over to blue roofs and podiums, again, similar, a bit more involved here, but it says testing is required to demonstrate the integrity of waterproofing membrane. Again, it must be undertaken suitably qualified and experienced third party, certified test agency who is independent of the roofing contractor, using either low voltage or high voltage ELD testing. So, you know, we're not preaching here, we're just literally making you aware of what is in LABC's, NHBC. We're going to go on to see some of the others, what is in their guidelines, because we're finding that a lot of people perhaps just don't realise that this is in there. So moving on to NHBC, again, another massive insurance provider. They go on to state what types of roof need this testing. So you've got your standard flat roof build-up, inverted warm roof, a bioverse brown roof, your blue roof, your bioverse brown roof, sort of similar, and then blue again. So that touches on the types of roof. And then we go on to see what they state in their guidelines. It says the system should be installed in accordance with the design and the waterproofing layers manufacturer's recommendations and integrity testing prior to covering. And so just going back to that slide we looked at earlier with the green roof build-up, this is why it's important to do it prior to covering. But once your green roof is installed, you've got 4 layers sitting on top of your waterproofing, and any type of testing of your waterproofing layer is nigh on impossible at that stage. Without removing your layers and getting back to your waterproofing layer, which is going to be costly, time consuming, it's very difficult to do. So it's a bit like the saying that says, when do you want to know there's a hole in your boat? Is it when you're sitting on the shore or when you're in the middle of the ocean? We're trying to get this testing done at the right time. So when the roofs are either finished or during the installation process. So moving on, still on NABC, it says include waterproofing layers suitable for use in the blue roof system and subject to independent third-party assessment. So for every type of roof mentioned here, so we're now looking at blue roofs, again, third-party testing is what they recommend. And again, they have the right to come out and ask to see the report at any stage. So moving on to our third-party independent section, integrity testing of waterproofing layer. Just to touch on what it says the waterproofing layer should be inspected for defects after installation. But notice it says any defects are to be repaired and retested and left in a satisfactory condition. So this again is all dependent on when this process takes place. So if it was a big project, maybe a 20,000 square meter project, it doesn't have to be that size. But if you're following a program, you need it to be tested before it's covered. It may be that there'll be several visits booked in. So we test an area, and then once it's signed off, that area can then be covered. But notice if any defects are found, these need to be repaired, and then the repaired areas are then retested to make sure they're in a satisfactory condition. So again, this would be included in the report, photographic evidence of the test taking place. So integrity testing of waterproofing layer should be inspected for defects after installation. Any defects are to be repaired, retested, so NHBC standards. Waterproofing layers on flat roofs, terraces and balconies greater than 50 metres squared, or roofs which are difficult to access, such on buildings over 3 stories, should be subject to either a visual inspection or an appropriate integrity test undertaken by a suitably qualified surveyor. So there is some membranes out there, as we mentioned in that paragraph, EPDM. This is a membrane which has a carbon fleck through the product, which makes it impossible to electronically test, because obviously you're running electronic current and you'll get false readings from the carbon in the product. So this is when either a visual inspection, a pick and probe, or another method of testing can be used. But again, still provided pictures and photographic evidence of this report taking place. So just touching on RAWTA. So as we mentioned earlier, RAWTA is Roofing and Waterproofing Test Association. This is a small group of test companies which have got together to create this company to work alongside the big insurance warranty providers. RAWTA are currently putting a clause in their membership that they want everyone to have an MVQ level 3 for testing membranes. So another qualification just to show competence of their testers. There is, different ways that people can go out and buy testers and do a day's training and go out there and say, yep, we can test roofs, but we are looking for competency. That is where the industry is going. So looking out for associations like RAWTA is a good way to make sure you're using someone who's qualified and recognised by the likes of NHBC, etc. So warranty support, procurement of testing services. Again, LABC, what they say, the waterproofing membrane should be tested for integrity before the application of any other components above it. So again, just touching on that thought, it's got to be done before that green roof is installed. But once that green roof is installed, being called out is nigh on impossible to then be testing the membranes. It's going to be time consuming. Imagine you've got a building that's being used, all of a sudden you've got a leak. To then have to strip off sections of the green roofs, it's going to take time. It may be that, it's going to be extensive costs involved compared to what would have been the cost if you'd have just done it at the right time when we're at the end of the process and getting the roof installed before that green roof goes in. So there is a need to have a cohesion on site between what trades. Sometimes it won't be the roofer itself who's installing the green roof, but it is a responsibility to get that roof tested before the next trade comes in to install. So just to give you an idea of the contents of what's included in a report, what's involved, it's the date of the test, the project name, address and reference number, name and address and contact details of the test provider. And so that would, in our case, be GeoShield, experience and trainings of testers. So as we said, MVQs, different things like that, membership of trade associations, like the RAWTA association we looked at, a description and efficacy of the waterproofing installation. So that's going to be included in the report. Details and large clear photographs. That just makes clear of what's been tested, what's been signed off, what perhaps defects were found, number of tests undertaken, and then confirmation of results of testing. So to have a report signed off, that needs to have a tick list of areas. Say it was a big roof, certain areas. What we tend to put in our reports would be a location map, which shows what areas have been tested, what areas are outstanding, etc., and we tick them off as we go. So it makes everything clear to what areas are complete and what still needs remediations carried out. So moving on to the types of testing. So here you've got your low voltage. So this is what we call the wet tester in the industry. This works by putting a low voltage current through the substrate and directs you to any breaches in the membrane. This is great because you can use it, as we'll see on the next slide, for field mapping. So unlike your standard flood test, which comes and tells you that your roof is leaking, you probably already know that because you've got a stain on the ceiling or your ceiling tiles are falling down. This is designed to specifically locate where the breaches are taking place, but this can be done in wet conditions, as you can see from the previous photograph. So as I touched on field mapping, so you can see the two handles coming down. You can close these in, make these wider, but once you narrow it right down to a small area, even down to a pinhole size defect can be found. So if damage has been caused by a small stone or a screw being trod into the product, this type of testing will find that. So even pinholes in liquid systems, something we come across quite often, it will pick that up. We then put a nice big yellow circle around the area, map that on our report, and an easy remediation can take place. Why is it superior to traditional flood testing? Well, we've touched on that, haven't we? Because you can use it on different types of membranes, and it can be used in the rain, obviously, and can be used on a fully flooded roof. But the whole point of it is it locates where the ingress breach is taking place. So it's not just to tell you whether the roof is leaking or not. It will specifically pinpoint the areas that the ingress is occurring. So moving on to our dry tester, very similar to the wet tester in a way, but done in dry conditions. Again, puts an electronic pulse, so you're connecting the machine up to your substrate base using either an earth point or could be a soil vent pipe if it's metal, something that's going through to your substrate. You're then pulsing an electronic pulse through the substrate, and you're brushing over with the copper brush head, as you can see in the picture. And once that electrical circuit can be made, that means there is a defect in the membrane, because anywhere that pulse can come up and spark on the brush head, if electric can come up and make the circuit, then it's followed a water course that's going down. So again, perfect for finding even the smallest of defects. This can be down to damage, can be down to installation, even a small welding defect. This is a single ply roof, this one here. Even a tiny weld defect, if there's moisture under the system, it will find that defect. It can be used on different types of membrane. Here we see it used on a felt system, bit of a mismatch on this roof of some of the different products used. But again, it will find any moisture coming through seams, through holes. It will detect that, and we can mark it up for easy remediation for a contractor to come in and follow up. As we said earlier, if a remediation is carried out, it can be retested. Depending on what the product is, it can be retested on the same day. If it was a felt system, that would be fine, single ply. The only times it may be difficult to retest during our visit would be if it's a liquid system that needs time to cure or time to dry. So it may be on that occasion that we would come back to retest on a different day once the product is fully cured. So again, the advantages of this type of testing over perhaps different methods: pinpoints membrane defects for efficient repair. Repairs can be immediately retested, but again, this is based on what product is being installed. Detects all breaches, even pinhole capillary action leaks. It can be used on slope roof systems and flashings, and enables direct, non-interpretive detection of membrane breaches. Very good method. A basic technology, really, when you think about what it's trying to achieve. I always, when people try to ask me to explain how it works, it's a bit like when you're 10 years old and you're in your science lab and your two wires don't quite meet up and they stick a bit of tin foil between the two wires to make the circuit. You're doing exactly the same thing on the roof. You're just using water to make the circuit up, to complete that circuit and let you know where the defects are. So traditional types of testing, flood testing here with on this occasion with some dye poured into it. Again, there is places for this type of testing. We're not saying it's not a feasible type of testing to use, but it doesn't pinpoint the exact location of leaks. So there are probably better methods out there that can give you an exact location rather than just an area of where the water is coming from. So when is flood testing used? Often used when electric testing is not practical. So maybe, for example, on EPDM, like we mentioned earlier, ELD, depending on what the substrate is, sometimes it's not practical to use as well. Normally, a concrete substrate is perfect, or if you've got a VCL layer, conductive VCL layer, which is great as well, or a silver foil insulation, again, perfect conductor. There is ways to still use ELD depending on what the substrate condition is and what your roof build-up is. So you can prove beyond reasonable doubt that water is not penetrating the membrane. So if you fill up a roof and nothing comes through, that you can tick that area off as it's not the cause. Can use soluble dyes. So again, gives you an indication of where the leak is coming from, different areas, different color dyes. Simple yet effective leak detection and integrity testing method. But as I mentioned, we prefer to use for independent testing the electronic test, because it is more comprehensive and gives you a better idea of how well the membrane's been installed and where the defects are. We've also got our vacuum box. I don't know if any of you've come across this before. So it's a vacuum sealed box. You can use this at high or low pressure. You can also fill it with a soluble detergent solution. So a bit like when you've got a puncture in your inner tube on your bike and you dip it in some water and see where the air comes out. By adding this vacuum type box with a detergent, you can see if there's any air escaping, and it will let you know there's a defect in the weld. It can be also used dry and to see how strong your welds are on your systems as well. Don't use it all the time, but it is effective in some cases, depending on what you're trying to detect. So just to touch on the British standards then. So we're looking now, rather than new roofs, we're looking at existing roofs. So what does the British standards recommend? Well, they recommend that a flat roof should be inspected at least twice a year. This is due to autumn time with the leaves and dirt and debris and the outlets being blocked, etc., and checking that drainage and things like that are getting away nicely. And then additional inspections are also advised if needed during these times as well. And as it says, electronic devices are available to detect leaks. So it's a good thing, again, like we said earlier, that thought of being proactive rather than reactive. It's something we're certainly heading towards in the industry, aren't we? Not to wait till we've got a leak. Our roofs are our first offence, aren't they, to our building? So it's important to make sure that we're keeping up with these inspections. So that's basically what we're talking about this morning. So the thought of independent inspections on new builds, and then the thought of keeping up with inspections on our existing roofs as well. So if there's any questions about anything, feel free to ask. I don't know if Shanika can help me. I can't see everything.
So we have one question at the moment from CM. What stage do you come out to site visit on the testing?
So that all depends on how big the project is, and when the client really wants us to come out. So what you've got to think about is, if you've not got other trades working on there and you're going to finish your project and you want it inspected at the end and handed over at that point, then that would be the best time. If you inspect too early and you've got other trades coming on that potentially could damage your roof, there's two ways of looking at it. One way is to get us in early, get the inspection done, and you've got proof that the roof is in good condition. And then if any other trades cause damage, you can then say, well, we had it inspected on this date and it was fine. We're now going to have to get it re-inspected and they're damaged. So you can use the two reports to correspond the condition it was in to what it's in now. But it all depends on circumstance of what people want, really. So there's not a right or wrong. The main thing is to make sure before anything is installed on top of that membrane that final inspection is done and the membrane is signed off as in good condition before anything is installed.
Thank you. Oh. Okay, that's fine. This is the time to submit any of your questions if you do have any. Alternatively, if you can send them to webinars@cbuilde.com and then I can send it over to Luke shortly. Okay. So we don't have any questions at the moment. So I think that's that.